Hi girls. Today we're going to start chapter 2 or topic 2, which is about economic systems, and specifically lesson 1 is about answering the 3 economic questions. So if we remember in chapter 1, it describes scarcity, that concept that we cannot all have everything that we want and need. So it's important to remember that we're very blessed here in the United States, that we have mostly everything we need. But that's not the case everywhere else in the world. So there's other communities and countries that, the people that live there can't meet their needs for food, for clothing, for shelter, because their resources are too scarce. So due to scarcity, countries have developed different economic systems. So an economic system is just a method used by a society to produce and distribute goods and services. So what type of economic system a country has really depends on their goals and values. So that's what we're going to be learning about today. So if we were in class together, I would ask you to just kind of write down your 3 most important needs. And most people would write down food, water, shelter, clothing, etc. And, then we would rank them in order of importance. So, if you said water was the most important because you needed to live, if you had to do away with one of those, most girls would say clothing. I mean, even though we don't want to be naked and afraid, we would probably give away that before food or water. All right. So these are questions that other countries have to ask themselves as well. So again, because economic resources are limited, each society has to answer these 3 key economic questions, and here they are. The first question is what goods and services should be produced? The second question is how should these goods and services be produced? And the third is who consumes these goods and services? So the way a society answers these 3 questions will determine what kind of economic system it uses. And we're going to go through various different types of economic systems, including the one that we have here in the United States, and we'll always refer back to these first 3 key questions. All right, so the first question, what goods and services should be produced? So each society has to decide this. It has to decide what to produce in order to satisfy the needs of its people. So in a modern society, this can be really difficult. We all know that we need food and shelter, but, we have so many additional important considerations. So how much of our resources should we devote to national defense, education, public health, welfare, or consumer goods? I mean, think about the situation we're currently living through with coronavirus, right? I'm going to guess that most of us say that we should use as many resources as possible now to produce goods that will help with this pandemic. Protective gear, ventilators, all these things that we hear on the news, right? We should really devote resources to healthcare, but this is today. 6 months ago, we might have chose, national defense, education, etc. So then, each government, each society has to then decide, okay, we're going to choose consumer goods to produce. Well, which ones, So that goes back to that guns and butters trade-off from chapter 1. Because of limited resources, each production decision a society makes comes at an opportunity cost. If you're making more military goods, you're not making consumer goods. So now if we are putting so much of our resources, and you've seen this throughout the last couple of days, that many companies are stepping up to produce ventilators. I saw last night on the news, Ford Motor Company was now producing ventilators at one of their plants, right? So that's the opportunity cost is what, girls? They're not making cars, right? So again, all of these decisions will always have an opportunity cost associated with it. So the second question, how should the goods and services be produced? So, should we produce with electricity, oil, solar power, nuclear power? If we decide to produce education, is that through public schools, charter schools, private schools? Should we produce food on large corporate farms, small family farms? So as you can see, there's countless questions and then countless decisions to be made. And that's what we said. Economics is all about decision making. Okay, so there's countless ways to create all of these goods and services, and they're all going to require land, labor, and capital. So that should ring a bell from chapter 1, the factors of production, okay? And they can be combined in different ways to help answer this question of how should goods and services be produced, okay? Here's a very quick example. I won't spend much time on this, but with modern machinery, farming has obviously become much quicker. If you have the same acre of land and you only have hand tools available versus modern tractors and tools, that is going to take, that acre of land to farm is going to take 56 worker hours compared to 2.9 worker hours when you have, the capital of those tractors and those tools, and your output is also going to increase, right? So again, how you farm your land, right? Absolutely depends on how you can combine those factor resources. So that's just one simple example of that. Okay, so the third question, who consumes the goods and services? So, we live in a land of plenty per se. You can walk into any Target and you just go down the shampoo aisle. You probably have, what do you think, girls? 40 to 50 brands of shampoo alone that you can choose. So, we have so many products at our fingertips. Those are just a few stats. We average 13 new products a day in this country. Retail stores typically carry about 30,000 different products, as opposed to 3,000 a couple of years ago, 50 years ago. It's just, we have so much. So how does that all get divided up? Who gets to drive a luxury car? Who can only afford the subway? Who gets access to private education? Who eats a well-balanced diet and who eats nothing but hot dogs, right? So these might sound trivial, but societies have to decide how to distribute the available goods and services, right? So I think a lot of those questions that I just posed, how do you go to private school versus public school? Well, your parents pay tuition, right? Because they have the income to do so. If you're only eating hot dogs for dinner versus, having Whole Foods and Trader Joe's groceries for dinner every night, again, that is based on factor payment. So the income you receive for supplying factors of production. So your land, labor, and capital. I make a salary for being your teacher. That helps me then decide what products, what goods and services I can afford in the marketplace. Okay, so that's labor. Landowners receive rent, right? Money, a factor payment for money. I receive a wage. Those who lend money to build factories or buy machinery receive payments with interest. We all know about our entrepreneurs. They receive a profit, okay? So another question that societies have to answer is, how much do you pay for these jobs? Why are teachers making less than doctors and lawyers? Especially now, think about all those healthcare workers. Do you think nurses should get a raise after this pandemic? My guess is yes. Do you want to be in the ER, right? So how we decide, what that piece of land is worth, how much teachers should earn versus doctors, right? Each society answers that very differently. If you think about that question about how much is a piece of land worth, like, why is a studio apartment in the West Village of Manhattan, why is the rent $5,000 for that small space, right? Would you pay $5,000 for a studio in Kansas City? No, right? But if we have valued that to be $5,000 and people are willing to pay it, okay? So, this all goes into our societal values, and how we answer these, these questions, right? So in learning the 3 economic questions, it's also important for us to learn different economic goals. And here they are. So I encourage you I will share this PowerPoint with you, but we really need to look at these goals. They're in your textbook as well. But they are economic efficiency, freedom, security and predictability, economic equity, growth and innovation, and other goals. So don't focus too much on this chart right now because we're going to go through it together in the PowerPoint. So economic efficiency, to be efficient, right? I think we know that vocabulary word. You don't want to waste anything, okay? So you want to maximize what you can produce with the resources you have to work with, okay? Again, you're being efficient with what you have readily available. So if your society can accurately assess what to produce, it absolutely increases your economic efficiency. So a few examples, if you're a manufacturer, would you make CDs right now? No. Have you ever bought a CD in your lifetime, girls? Probably not, right? No one listens to CDs anymore. Everyone gets their music digitally, right? That would be extremely inefficient for you to produce CDs. Okay, so you need to be able to reach consumers with products that they want. And if you, in your country, in your community, cannot deliver goods, then you're not being efficient. So you would not be meeting this goal of economic efficiency. Second goal, economic freedom. We have a huge amount of freedom here in our country. It's a key cultural value for us. We are able to become entrepreneurs. We are able, to forge our own path, to pick our own career. If I want to be a teacher, if I want to be an engineer, if I want to be a doctor, right? I have the freedom to do that. That doesn't happen in all countries, okay? So different countries allow for a different amount of economic freedom. So I would say if we were ranking our goals here in America, economic freedom would be at the top of the list. The third goal, security and predictability. Okay, so we like things to be predictable. We don't like uncertainty, okay? People like to know that if they go to the gas station, there's gas in the pumps. We like to know that milk and bread are in the grocery stores, okay? Think of the recent panic buying and shopping, and people don't like to go down the aisle at Stop and Shop and see no paper towels or toilet paper. That feels very unsafe, right? We don't like that uncertainty. So in normal times, we can go to the store with no problems. The gas pumps are full, the stores are full of food, right? So, that's economic security, right? We assume or assure, it assures the people that goods and services are available when we need them, okay? It also means, if you get paid every 2 weeks, direct deposit, it goes into my bank account every 2 weeks. It's predictable, okay? So something known as a safety net. So that is a set of government programs that protect people from experiencing unfavorable economic conditions. So that can include injuries, layoffs, natural disasters. So we as a country provide safety nets. We provide unemployment insurance. If you were to get hurt on the job, you can usually collect disability pay. After Sandy, a natural disaster, many people received assistance from FEMA on Staten Island. So those would all go under the umbrella of safety nets. So again, that's providing economic security. We have that in this country. It does not exist, around the world in every country. So again, Social Security for older Americans, these are things that we have here, but I cannot say that for other countries. Moving on, economic equity as the fourth goal. This has to do with how we divide up our economic pie. So should we all be the same? Should one's consumption depend on how much one produces, right? So that kind of goes back into, should we all be paid the same salary for vastly different jobs, okay? So should doctors make the same as a cashier at Target, So we in America don't believe we don't believe in that, right? That everyone should receive equal pay, right? So we value jobs differently. We value that a lawyer should make more money than a nurse, right? That doctors earn more than teachers due to their commitment, due to their experience, due to their level of education, right? Due to the level of hardship in their profession, right? So we, as Americans, we divide up our economic pie differently, but other countries do not. So that's coming later in the lessons. All right, we're almost done. So the fifth goal was growth and innovation. Very simply, your economy has to grow for the nation to improve its standard of living. Okay, if you want to achieve economic prosperity, there has to be more jobs added, more people joining the workforce. There has to be constant innovation, constant advances in technology and tools. Think back to the Industrial Revolution. That all increases efficiency, and that all leads to economic growth. If your nation's economy is shrinking instead of growing, not necessarily for a week, a month, or a year, but over a prolonged amount of time, that could signal problems for that country, right? So you always want the economy to grow. And then, of course, there'll always be additional goals, environmental protection, universal health care. So again, as I mentioned in the very beginning of this video, the countries have to, prioritize. They have to decide how they're going to rank their goals. Is economic freedom number one over economic efficiency and growth? Is economic growth first? So each country will make those decisions, and they will be different. So the last thing we're going to talk about today is actually our very first type of economic system. You're going to learn that there'll be 4 different types, and the first one is a traditional economy. Girls, this is extremely primitive. Think about like a small rural village where the people have been doing the same, have lived the same way of life for, years, decades, centuries. So they rely on habit and custom or ritual to decide what to produce. There's really no innovation or change or technology. These societies revolve around the family. Boys work the jobs of their fathers, girls do the same. It's usually a very close-knit community. So again, this is not seen here in America, but in other countries it is. So this is just a little picture of, what it might look like. Think hunting, gathering, fishing. They're not going to a supermarket. It's all very on their own, and again, very primitive. Okay, so this is our first economic system that we're going to talk about, a traditional economy. Our next lesson, section 2, is all about the free market. So that's a different type. That's our second type of economic system that we're going to learn about in our next class.